Welcome, and thanks for listening to Intrinsic Investigations. My name is Mr. Olivo, and I created this podcast because I've been fortunate enough over the last decade to see unique and thought-provoking projects happen in my classroom, and we wanted a place to showcase them. The true heart of this podcast lies not in the content discovered, but in exploring the personal stories of these young researchers as they journey through uncharted and unfamiliar intellectual terrain. By sharing their stories, we hope to normalize the challenges and frustrations that come with independent research, and also share those moments where students transcend the normal grind of the school day to discover concepts that range from the global to deeply personal. We will begin with a brief introduction to the student of focus, why they picked their topic, and discuss their growth over the course of the last year. It should be mentioned that the opinions expressed in this podcast in no way reflect the opinions of our school district, Bergen County Technical Schools and Special Services, or our school itself, Bergen County Technical High School, Teterboro, or the College Board. The work detailed in this podcast was most likely completed in AP Capstone, but this podcast is in no way affiliated with the College Board. This is the first episode after Memorial Day break. How was your Memorial Day, Joseph?
Well, we went to Canada, so it wasn't very American.
Oh, okay. I've been to Toronto during my Memorial Day break, and I thought it was a great time.
Really?
The weather was nice.
All right.
I don't know where did you go in Canada?
We went to Quebec City, so
okay, so that's
a little far from
further from Toronto. All right, Canadian-U.S. holiday overlap aside, you know what? Introduce yourself to the audience.
Hey there, my name's Joe Kim. I'm a senior in the Law and Justice major at Bergen Tech right now, and I am heading to Princeton next year.
Congratulations, you are the only senior this season to do the podcast.
That's intimidating.
Is it? Okay. I thought it wouldn't be. I thought you'd be cool with it because of your seniority. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of your work, why don't you give the audience an overview of what you aim to do and like your method and how you went about gathering data, almost like a tiny abstract of what your project was.
No problem. So my project was based on the Russo-Ukrainian war, specifically reporting regarding the war. I noticed initially that there was, even within Western news, which itself claims to be unbiased, there was a degree of noticeable bias in like what they chose to report and like which aspects of the war they each emphasized. And so I want to explore that further with a mix of qualitative and quantitative methods. And so I utilized a method called critical discourse analysis, which kind of looks at the sentence structure of sentences and words within these articles, picks out which phrases are most repeated, which words are most likely to be correlated with one another. And using that, I analyzed 5 different news sources from across Europe and America. Specifically, I took them from America, Russia, Germany, Ukraine, and Britain, which are the top 5 countries who contribute the most money to the war each year.
Okay.
And based off of this, I utilized software such as Sketch Engine to kind of gather corpora or like samples of all the articles on the war in Ukraine that they ever published. And based off of that, I analyzed them utilizing more software. Personally, I use Ankonk. Mm-hmm. In order to really determine which collocates, or rather words that are most repeated, were present within these corpora and what they signified.
All right. And what did you ultimately find out? We're going to get into everything you just discussed, but what did you ultimately find out by doing this work?
Right. So for a really basic overview of what I found out, I found that each news source had its own distinct form of bias, rather what it focused on. And so what's really key to understand...
What you mean by that is like the BBC versus the New York Times had its own way of reporting about this the same conflict.
Yeah, you'd see Kyiv Post has a different position, different things it emphasizes about the war compared to CNN, which in turn is different on what it reports than the Moscow Times, so on and so forth.
Okay. Why did you pick this topic? Because you just laid out a whole bunch for us, but focusing on the war in Ukraine and particularly discourse in these different news sources, why did you pick this? The war in Ukraine has been going on 2014? Is that when the annexation of Crimea occurs?
Well, the real war began in 2022, but yeah, Russia's been in Ukraine since 2014.
2014. Okay,
Yeah.
so, and then the war reaches an ignition point in 2022.
Yeah.
So 4 years into that, 12 years removed from the annexation of Crimea. Why now?
Well, when it was 2022, I was just kind of like, getting into high school, kind of fitting in and trying to figure out what I most liked. And so
You were a ninth grader.
I was a ninth grader, yeah.
gosh,
I know, bit of a change in scenery.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I found that I really like politics.
Okay.
Politics, geopolitics, especially kind of like how countries across the world interact with one another. And this war just pops out of nowhere in a country I'd barely heard about previously. And it's so intense. There's so much coverage around it. It seems so momentous the way the news networks described it. Oh my God, Russia is invading Europe for the first time in, a really long time. And so that's kind of what got me hooked on the war, like how important it was in like our collective psyche. And so I've just been following up with it every now and then for the last few years. It's 2026 now, so that's like 4 years and counting.
Yeah.
And that's when I really start to notice the patterns of choice reporting within these news networks.
You chose this project, it seems from what you just said, almost as a way of seeing how your ignorance from 4 years ago could be like, sort of illuminated by digging deeper into the topic. Obviously, you were picking up things here and there over the course of the last 3 years about Ukraine, about Russia, and I guess about news media reporting as well. How were you influenced over those maybe moments of information gathering or illumination over the last 3 years to get to a point where you're using a critical discourse analysis, or I'm going to call it a CDA just to abbreviate, to try to really dig deep into what you were seeing with your news sources? Like, what else did you notice over the last 3 years, like sophomore year, junior year, leading up to senior year?
I think it was just a matter of passive exposure over time. Obviously, my reading comprehension improved over the last few years, so I think I was like more innately equipped to kind of like detect these trends. But I think it was just a matter of sampling more news sources over time. Like, I didn't just limit myself to American news. I looked at British news. Even occasionally I looked at Ukrainian reporting. Stuff on YouTube too sometimes comes up, and that's a really interesting window into what these networks are really focusing on in regards to like what they choose to portray. And just based off of that exposure, I think I just kind of subconsciously picked up on that pattern over time that these news networks were reporting on the same thing over and over again.
How often do you read the news?
Every day.
Every day. Is there a particular routine to that? Do you wake up in the morning, you reach for your phone, you're like, let me just check the news?
Some days it's just like 20 seconds scrolling the headlines, other days it's like 30 minutes at the dinner table, just like flipping through the Wall Street Journal. It can be anything.
Like literally flipping through the Wall Street
Literally, we have a
You have
newspaper.
a copy of the... Wow.
Yeah, we get it mailed to our house.
That's awesome. You're probably in a very small group of people at this point that still physically reads the news in newspaper format.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice.
Yeah. Do you prefer reading a newspaper over reading online news sources? Or do you have a preference or not really?
News is news.
News
Words are
is news.
words, right? So, reading physically is nice. It kind of gives you that tactile feedback, that you're reading like something physical. But you could just search up something on the internet anytime, so it's a bit more convenient in that regard.
Do you find yourself stumbling upon things more in a digital or a print, or like a print context?
Well, digital, because the purpose of these websites is to like draw you further and like, oh my God, look at this, look at that. And so sometimes they get pulled into the rabbit hole.
Was the Wall Street Journal part of the sources that you analyzed for your project?
That's actually really interesting. So Wall Street Journal, yes, initially was one of the sources I wanted to analyze, mainly because of its like high viewership and its pretty good reputation in the Western world.
Yeah.
But the issue really came from software. So as I mentioned earlier, I used the sketch engine software to kind of like scrape data off of these websites, like gather articles and compile them into samples. The Wall Street Journal didn't really take kindly to that, probably because it's behind a paywall.
Okay.
And so I kind of had to give it up for CNN, which still was a really good source representative of America.
Can you explain to the audience what a critical discourse analysis is and why it was useful to you in this type of research? Like, why was this the right tool for the job?
Yeah, no problem. So critical discourse analysis, or CDA, is in essence analyzing hidden power structures. Now I know that's a little vague. In writing, yes. In any sort of literature, actually, not just limited to news. And it's a very qualitative as opposed to quantitative method at its core. You look at trends within sentences, trends across entire passages using sentences. But the issue with CDA is that it's quite time consuming because classical CDA, you have to go sentence by sentence by sentence, look at the words within each sentence and kind of determine, okay, is this a verb? Is this describing the subject? Is this describing the circumstance? You can't do that at scale when there are hundreds of news articles to analyze, each with like dozens of sentences. And so I chose a bit of an offshoot, which is called corpus-assisted discourse studies, which kind of blended quantitative and qualitative together so that simultaneously I can gather trends on which words were most common, which verbs were most common within these corpora, while also being able to qualitatively draw conclusions based off of what I saw. And because nobody in the field has really started using CADS yet, because despite it being such a promising method of analysis, I thought that would be good to fill in the gap.
And which news outlets did you apply this CDA to?
So, as I mentioned earlier, I used CNN to represent America. I used the Kyiv Post to represent Ukraine. I used Deutsche Welle to represent Germany, BBC to represent the UK, and the Moscow Times to represent Russia.
All right, so you have one representative sample from, like you said, it was like each of those 5 countries who all have a large amount of like financial investment in this conflict.
Yes, it's not a perfect sample, but I wanted to gather the news sources that were most representative, had like the most English-speaking readers of all news sources within those countries, because that's kind of the realm that's most relevant to us as English speakers.
Great. And before we get into your method, I understand you had some help internationally. You're the first student here who had international help with your method.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so you want to talk about that a little bit?
Right. So thank you, Professor Tenorio, University of Granada, Professor of Linguistics, and probably the single most expert on CDA, like anywhere in the field. Her primer on CDA was actually one of the main reasons why I chose to go into that as a method. And by talking to her over Zoom, I was able to just generally determine which scholars in the field like McHenry and Hardy were the best for referencing like what CDA means, like what it's targeting, kind of weaknesses and strengths of CDA, like how it's highly qualitative, but that can be a double-edged sword.
Yeah. You want to explain that double-edgedness? I think I know where you're going with this.
Right. So CDA is meant to be more in-depth at its core than other methods. That means that for classical CDA, without any software assistance, you analyze sentence by sentence. Now, if we were talking about short passages, maybe just like a single chapter of a book, that would be pretty good. But we are, in this project, I was analyzing hundreds of articles. There was no way for me to scalably do that with all the other stuff that was going on outside. So I chose CADs instead for that reason, to kind of get like a happy balance between the two.
We'll get into the CADs in a moment. I want to ask, and be honest here, was it intimidating reaching out, or are you a seasoned pro at this point because you're a senior? You're like, you know what, I'm just going to send this email out to this professor and just see if she is willing to help me.
Not nervous per se, but I was a little cynical isn't the right word, but I had lower expectations than you probably would expect, because I was like, well, she's in another country and a completely separate time zone. I'm not sure if she's even gonna pick up on my email. She's a professor, she has like professory things she got to do. Yeah. But she responded, and that was a really great moment for me.
Yeah, we thank her for taking the time. That's, I guess, you had very tempered expectations. Maybe not cynical, but just like
tempered. Tempered is the right
I doubt
word.
This person's going to get back to me.
Yeah.
So when you got that email back, how did you feel?
I felt really excited. I thought that this was a great opportunity, and I was going to snap it up first chance I could get.
Okay, great. How did you use her work and her feedback to give your CADS process direction? So let's get into that method.
Based on what she talked about, the very quantitative aspect of CDA, foremostly, she encouraged me to pursue it, which is why I think I went into the field into the first place.
Okay.
The qualitative analysis part of CDA really appealed to me. CADS is something I developed more independently as a result of trial and error. Looking into CDA articles, I realized, well, this is really in depth, but I don't think that I can do this for hundreds of articles. And so I happened to stumble upon a few CADS researchers kind of extolling about the benefits of such a method. And I thought that, well, I could adapt this. Mm-hmm. I could use it while staying kind of true to the original idea of CDA.
And is it basically CDA, but it's going to be machine assisted in some sense, or how is it different than CDA?
It's software assisted. Software is used to collect data at a scale that humans would probably take a lot longer to do.
Okay.
Like data scraping, for instance, you just scrape articles right off of these websites, and voila, you have 100 articles ready for analysis and selection.
What did the analysis that was software assisted reveal about these news sources?
Separate software from the corpus collector software kind of gave trends of what collocates or most frequent noun keywords were present within these. They also showcased which verbs were most present based on pure frequency. The software also automatically analyzed which of these collocates were most relevant to keywords.
So what were the most frequently used verbs depending on the news source? I guess the reason why I'm asking is that seems very important to understand the action being assigned to a particular country.
Do you want me to go like country by country, or just like a few examples?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for people to get a few examples of how the analysis was working. Then if you give the overall trends, that would be indicative of what you found in the study.
Right. So each verb is different. It's very unique across each news source. The Kyiv Post representing Ukraine, for instance, has a very it has a very emphasized position on what it wants to focus on. And so the transitive verb I found to be most significant, like most representative of what it focused on here, was the word leaves, like as in leaving an area. Okay. And so based on this, we could determine that it was focused on physical or material aspects of the war. And that makes sense because for Ukraine, the war is very physical, very up close and personal. And literal actions within the borders are very important to the average reader.
So would an example be like Russian troops leave insert, Ukrainian territory named there.
Or maybe like Ukrainian unit XYZ leaves the village of X, Y, and Z.
Okay. All right.
So denoting like battlefield actions.
Gotcha.
CNN, on the other hand, has a more interesting verb, which is said, like as in a person said X, Y, and Z. And what's interesting is that looking at the common actor in the circumstances present, there's a lot of emphasis on Putin, on Russia as an entity, and kind of more terms on a broader scale. Like we have circumstantial nouns being Trump, we have invasion, new president, annual, all things not so much focused on the war itself, but more like how the war is relevant to America's leaders, and to Russia, which is an American adversary. I
recall while you were presenting, I think it was the second to last time you were presenting your findings, you had something about stock market performance, or it was like how events occurring overseas were impacting American markets.
I think you're confusing that with my European results.
Oh, okay.
It's good, but Europe was focused more so on indirect aspects, like for instance the economy, the world overall, rather than like Kyiv, for instance, the physical aspects of the war.
And when you say physical aspects of the war, they're talking about things like casualties, like literal destruction,
casualties, specific entities operating within the borders, specific events, towns, locations that are relevant to the war.
And so then like a German newspaper or the European reporting, like with the BBC, is more focused on energy, like probably like energy disruption, like the availability of natural gas or something like that.
Overall, the economic aspect that I picked up was surprisingly minor, all things considered. It mostly focused on geopolitical topics of kind of like political ripple effects relevant to Europe as a whole. But there was also a fair amount of material focus there as well.
So you have this very large topic, like literally people are dying in this conflict that has now been going on for over, since 2022, but since 2014 it's been brewing.
Yep.
And your work is very reductive. Like you're just finding the nouns, finding the verbs, like finding the actions. Mm-hmm. What are the big takeaways from going that reductive with the work, if that makes sense? Like it's like to some people, to someone who's listening who's like, ugh, does it really matter? Like the types of verbs that are being used in this context. Why is it important that you engaged in this process to understanding this geopolitical conflict?
I mean, foremostly, I like to think of my paper as kind of like a primer. Like Professor Tenorio's work was a primer on CDA. I want this one to be kind of an introduction on the usage of CADs regarding war reporting.
Okay.
I think that the very like showing of bias within these newspapers is significant in itself. Like it proves that Western news
it supports the idea. Let's not go supports the idea.
Yeah, supports the idea. Gotta stay within words.
Stay nuanced.
Yep. It supports the notion that all news to a degree is biased in its own way. Like especially Russian news networks, they have a lot more incentive to be biased, but even independent news networks, they can be biased as well. And so I think that really would help in having the average person be more cautious about what they consume and kind of take from multiple sources to kind of get a more holistic view of the overall situation.
It seems like you're getting into the application of your work, which if your work is demonstrating that all news sources have bias, which shouldn't be too surprising, I would hope, because anyone who's critical of media should notice, like, every news source has its own way of reporting. Well, ultimately, news sources are coming from people.
Yeah.
And the testimony of others can be distorted, whether on purpose or by accident. What does someone take away from your findings with the war in Ukraine? Like, how should they how should your findings be applied by someone maybe like you 3 years ago who didn't know a ton about the war, but then gradually came to understand it by reading news sources?
In a war where multiple great powers are kind of fighting over this piece of land, and not just that, but for their own security, for the countries around them, for their people. I mean, in these momentous conflicts, everybody has individual interests, no matter what some individuals might want to tell you. No country is completely neutral in a war. They're all going to have their own biases. And so when the average person looks at reporting, when they see what these news networks, these nationally affiliated networks choose to report on, choose to decide what is important to their listeners and their readers, I think that there's an important need for normal people to be able to look at what they're reporting and say, hey, that's you're being a little selective about what you're picking. I want to see the bigger picture. I want to be able to have a more nuanced view of the situation so I can make my own ideas rather than be comfortable in the notion that you're kind of trusting them to give you unbiased news.
When you say a normal person, you just mean just the average consumer of
the average
news.
Joe.
Okay, all right. Right now, we only have about 3 minutes left, but as of last night, I'm just looking at the headlines right now. BBC has reported that the U.S., this is the headline, U.S. launches new strikes on Iran, targeting missile sites and boats. So it seems like whatever ceasefire was happening, that ceasefire has now ended as of today.
Yes.
So
not the first time.
So if someone were to take your work and apply it to, let's say, the same exact news sources, like BBC, the Moscow Times, CNN, run it back with me one more time, and it was
Deutsche Welle.
And
the Kiev Post.
And the Kiev Post. And let's say they were just examining the war with Iran. How would they apply your framework into this context? What would they do? Just exactly the same thing?
Probably the same thing, but I think the results they would get would be much different because this time U.S. is a direct party in this war and Russia's kind of distant from it.
Okay.
And also the stakes are going to be a lot different because although oil is important for everyone, it's not so much a national security issue for Russia and Ukraine because they're so far away. The same methods, the exact same terminology and strategies could still be applied here, but I think the results would be a lot more interesting and different.
I'm just scanning the headlines right now on the Kiev Post, and I found the only mention I have is from May 24th, so it's from 2 days ago. Iran refuses to hand over uranium impending U.S. peace deal. That's it. Honestly, the rest of the headlines are very Ukraine, EU, and Russia focused.
And if you look at the top of the news site, I don't know if it's there, but there might be a kill counter.
There definitely is. Very good. Yeah, I'm looking right now. There's Russia's losses in a Icon late. Oh, they lost when this was updated. They lost a tank recently. They've lost 64 artillery units.
They do that a lot.
Yeah, and oh my gosh, is this correct? 1,357,950 troops have died. Russian troops have died. That's what it says in terms of the Russia's losses. Now, I don't know if that means deaths or wounding. I'm not sure. But yeah, it lays out pretty directly a counter of what's happening there. And the headline is Zelensky meets Belarus opposition leader in Kiev summit. So yeah, you're right. The stakes would be different. I think that for what you just called your average consumer of the news, I guess they have to then look critically at how the U.S. invasion of Iran is being portrayed in our news media.
Yep.
But they don't need a scraper to do it.
Not necessarily. They just need to be aware of the fact that bias is there, and it would probably be best to consult other sources to fill in the gaps, as one would say.
Okay, so then what does that look like? Is it almost taking your... Is it hey, let me check this headline out and let me look at the verbs that they're using? Almost what are shortcuts people can take to flex that media literacy muscle?
I mean, looking at the verbiage was just a way for me to prove that there was bias within discrete news networks.
That there was bias.
Support that there was bias.
Need that
Yeah. Gotta fix that distinction. But I think that what the average consumer can do is just, sample different news articles on the same topic. Like look at BBC, look at Fox News, CNN, just kind of sample all of them to see what are the common facts that are being accepted across these networks, and more importantly, what aspects of the facts are these networks focusing on?
What is your go-to as a person who's trying to promote media literacy and critical thinking? What is your go-to for the news? Like, is it the Wall Street Journal or is it Associated Press?
Ground News,
you do Ground News.
Website is actually a really good nexus to get multiple news sources on the same topic.
But from multiple levels of not only just reliability, but multiple political biases.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as a default, I like Reuters, I like BBC. Every now and then I look at the Wall Street Journal a lot too.
Just because it's physically there.
And it's reliable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or it's reliable enough for what you need it. It's probably, we've talked about Ad Fontes Media, but if you've never been to adfontesmedia.com, you could check that out.
Yeah.
But it's reliability. It's not just as simple as reliable, not reliable. It's fact reporting with a mix of analysis. That's probably...
Or mostly analysis.
Yeah, or mostly. The Atlantic would be mostly analysis with a skew left, whereas the Wall Street Journal, I think, on that list is slightly higher in terms of reliability with a slight right bias. But it's not mostly hyper-partisan right.
It's mostly centrist. There's a mix. It's mostly in the opinion column.
Exactly. That's where it gets difficult, is when you're dealing with opinion sections, whether it's with the New York Times or with the Wall Street Journal. It's obviously... The opinion pieces are going to be, exactly that. They're going to be opinions. So
opinions
doesn't mean that there's not anything valid there. It's just you got to check them, as you said. Don't just consume your news source from one news. You don't consume your news just from one source.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Joe. Any final words before we close this out and you graduate in about 2 weeks?
Just again, want to give my thanks to Professor Tenorio. I don't know if you're listening right now, but you really helped me make this project a reality. So you're the best for that. And I want to thank Mr. Olivo for helping me through the process.
All right. Well, thank you for being open to being part of the process.
Take care.
All right. Take care.